Part 3, The Last Dragon. Chapter 1, Journey's End. Kino Amark. There are times that my power works and times that it does not. When the power I am trying to copy is that of the person near me, I succeed. But when it is a power I had used in the past, and the owner of the power has long since been away from me, harnessing that power becomes challenging. "Are we still going to Kanelan?" Grandpa asked. He was riding his bay ahead of me, his snowy eyebrows furrowed. I made my bay canter to catch up with him. "I think so," I said. "Yes." The lines on Grandpa's forehead deepened in worry. He was an old man. He used to be such a great and important man. He is Northsam Mendel Amark, the Emperor of Akea, before Storm Aaron took over. How that happened is still a mystery to me. I only got acquainted with him recently, so there was not much to talk about. So far, all we ever discuss is how I can harness my power. It had been an okay moon turn for me. I practiced religiously so that I could manifest shuffling, which according to Grandpa, is a magnificent power. One that could equal the Emperor's power if mastered well. Or otherwise, shuffling could be so rotten that it would be as though I had no power at all. Before we began the journey to search for my friends, Grandpa and I talked lengthily about where we should go first, and we both decided that Kanelan should be our first stop. I told him about the last sniffler and how, for a while, I was able to copy his power. That was what I was using just now to track my friends. It was challenging to use sniffling now, unlike when the power first manifested in me. Grandpa said it is because the last sniffler is already dead, and even though I was able to copy his power, the power that I am using now is no longer magnified by its owner's presence in this world. Grandpa said that shuffling works best if, at any one point, I was able to use the power beside the person whose power I copied from, because that means that I will be able to replicate the exact pattern of wielding the power. Also, if I was close to the owner of the power when I used it, the power could be magnified because it feeds on the original source of the power. This might explain why I was having difficulty using sniffling. I get some sense every now and then, but it is not enough to give me an exact path to follow. At first, I thought the weak sniffling was only because I had not mastered shuffling yet, but it turns out that I would still lose hold of sniffling even if I was greatly concentrating. The length of time that I harnessed it was only enough to pinpoint if we were still on the right track to reach my friends, but the scent never lingered long enough for me to follow an exact route. It was still useful, though, because all we had to do was travel as fast as we could to hopefully find my friends. I have yet to get the chance to think about my mother. What I wanted to do was focus on finding Pyper. Once we find her, I will focus on finding Mayo next. Come to think of it, maybe I should try and search for Mayo before Pyper. Mayo Calo has been my best friend long before Pyper came into our lives, and I would hate for Mayo to learn that I did not look for him first. I am pretty sure that he would be mad at me. But then again, Pyper is also his friend, and my decision to search for Pyper should be alright with him. Knowing Mayo, I doubt my initial assessment of the situation because I'm pretty sure that Mayo would have preferred that I search for him first. Maybe I should look for Mayo. I closed my eyes and tried to picture his face. Images of our past adventures entered my mind, and for a brief moment, I was filled with nostalgia. Mayo was the one who shared his sandwiches with me at school. He was also the one who kept on popping into our cottage to tell me about our homework in class. Not only that, Mayo would always jeer me with his thirst for adventures. I wonder what he could be doing now. Nothing came to me, though. Even as I closed my eyes and conjured Mayo's plump face, his dark hair that always fell to his forehead, his little pointed nose, and his dark eyes, there's nothing. A scent came to me, but at such an inopportune timing because right that moment, the horse jolted to a stop. I gripped the reins tightly and let out a yelp. "Kino!" Grandpa shouted. I opened my eyes and saw that the horse had trudged away from the path, and I was close to a precipice. The wind blew against my face, and chill coursed down my spine as I imagined falling onto the steep slope. I suddenly remembered those times when I would wear wings that were made from leaves and jump from a hill like this one to try to fly. I had been courageous then, but looking back now, I understand better why my mother had forbidden me to do it. The thud of the horse's hooves came closer, and when I turned around, Grandpa was beside me. He quickly took my horse's rein, dragging me away from the cliff. I breathed out in relief. "What came over you?" he asked. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare you. I was trying to find Mayo and..." Grandpa shook his head with slight dismay. "Focus, Kino," he said. "We cannot save all of your friends if you allow your emotions to control you. We'll get Pyper, and then we'll find Mayo next. Riding your bay with your eyes closed is reckless. I just wanted to know if Mayo was closer to us, and if that were the case, then it would be easier to get him first. He would be mad at me if he learns that I chose to get to Pyper first and not him," I responded. "Oh," Grandpa said, shaking his head, "he will understand. He's the one you said that wanted to be a soldier, right? If memory serves us right, then he would want to save the ladies first before the men. Trust me, Kino, he wouldn't mind." I wanted to tell Grandpa that Mayo doesn't think like that. Even though he is my friend, he could be quite selfish too, but I decided not to contradict him. "All right, Grandpa. Let's go," I said. I was still breathing fast, and my hands were clammy from the immediate surge of fear. Somewhere to the north, I could almost feel Pyper. There was something wrong. Yesterday, I could sense her in one location, but now, it felt as though she was moving. I could feel a change in her course, and now, she was slightly to the east. "Grandpa, I don't think Pyper is in Kanelan," I said. "I can still sense her, but now she is a little bit northeast." Grandpa's face turned ashen. "Well, I'll be damned. Why? What lies northeast?" I asked. "The grand volcanoes of Karasthea," was Grandpa's reply.
Pyper, San Diego. The sky was still dark when Dogen, Mayo, and I started the journey to Karasthea. We knew it was going to be an arduous journey, but there was no other option for us. Kino was not captured by the Emperor's men, which was a good thing. And since he was not in Kanelan with the talks about how the Emperor was on the hunt for the last dragon's egg, we thought it wise to distract the Emperor by going on a wild goose chase after the egg as well. Before I met Arden and Quila, I was not exactly aware of the last dragon's egg. To me, it was all just a myth. Something that the elders made up so that Nivan children would always obey them. Tales about the dragons and how their breath could scorch anyone were known to all Nivens, but they were just tales. After all, I have never seen one, nor any evidence of such existence. But to learn that the Emperor is on the hunt for the last dragon's egg somehow qualifies the fact that there really might be a dragon's egg. Mayo was quiet for a change. Perhaps his time in the dungeon has made him accustomed to keeping his thoughts to himself. "How did you manage to escape the dungeons?" I asked. "Miroe used his power, and I also used mine," Mayo said. Dogen turned around. "Really? In all my days serving the palace, no one has ever managed to escape the dungeons alive. Didn't they give you the Anatan herb to block your power?" "They did it for Miroe, but they never gave me a dose. My power is so passive that they probably thought I didn't need it. To be honest, I never thought I would need it too." "So if Miroe's power was blocked, how was he able to use it?" I asked. "Do you remember how my power was so weird that I thought it had no use at all? Apparently, it is quite powerful if I just put it to good use. What I did was search for the toxic components in Miroe's body, and I extracted it using my mind just like the way I did when I sucked the snake's venom from your leg." "Wow," I said. "That is quite brilliant. I'll keep that in mind. Chances are we're going to encounter a lot of the Emperor's soldiers, and we can make good use of your power." Dogen was also looking at Mayo in amusement. Perhaps he could not believe what he had just heard. "Do you think you can extract the power of the soldiers once we come face to face with them?" I asked. Mayo shook his head. "I don't think I can do that. I can only suck out what's bad from someone else's body." I thought about it some more. Mayo was probably right. I wish there was some way to know how else we could harness his power. "Have you been to Karasthea?" Mayo asked after a while. I shook my head, but I caught Dogen nodding. I had been there before, but only to scout the place. There are so many volcanoes in the vicinity that winter never touches that place. I remember things my father told me about Thea, that it is like hell, and I never quite believed him until I set foot in that province. You will understand what I'm saying once we get there. I'm not sure if we're doing the right thing. Why are we chasing after a dragon's egg again? I wish we were still in Canela, I blurted out. No. You're only saying that because you're scared of the volcanoes, Mayo said. And who wouldn't? I've never seen a volcano erupt before. The volcanoes haven't erupted in a long time, and I doubt if they will soon, so just focus on the task that we have right now. Which is what exactly? Find the dragon's egg? Mayo said, doubt unable to hide in his voice. I don't think now is the right time for us to talk about it. We can't turn our backs after agreeing on this decision. Remember, if we can only get hold of the egg before the Emperor does, that's the only time we're going to stand a chance against him. And the best part is that we will probably get to save Kino, Dogen said. I don't know how getting hold of the dragon's egg would make a difference. Yeah. Me too. If I had my hand on such a thing, I would throw it away or crush it, Mayo said. Better kill the dragon if the Emperor wants it that badly. I don't think we can control a dragon anyway, I said in agreement with Mayo. Dogen fell silent for a while, but he had no comforting words to offer us. He was probably as lost to the cause as Mayo and I was. But we must keep pushing forward. As we continued the journey, nobody said another word anymore. When evening came, we discovered that the path we took led us to many long stretches of land with hardly any fruit-bearing trees. It was a good thing we at least had horses, otherwise, it would have been an even longer journey for all of us. Dogen led us to an empty spot. He looked around, scouring the place for any potential danger, and when there was nothing to see, he gestured for us to join him. We set out to pitch an old tent that Dogen retrieved from one of the stockrooms in the Kanelan palace. He knew where all the supplies were kept. Being a former palace guard had its perks. Minutes later, we were all inside the tent and relaxing. Inside my head, I wondered what our chances of survival were in case a group of soldiers passed by. Would they slaughter us, or would they just let us be? It gets so boring, Mayo complained. I thought you liked going out on adventures? I asked. I never said, without any food. That's part of the thrill. To survive through all of these, in this condition. I'm sorry, I'll try to find some food for us tomorrow, Dogen said. His eyes were solemn, and he sounded accountable for us again. It's all right. We knew what we were getting into, and it's all for the common good. Dogen nodded, but I could sense that he was still concerned. He got up and said, I will take the first watch. Go and rest. I will come in and wake you up when it's time to continue the journey. I glanced at Mayo, who still had a frown on his face. It would take a lot of convincing, so I lay down and ignored him until all loose thoughts vanished from my head. The last thing I remembered was Mayo's stomach growling so loudly that I thought it was him snoring. The following day, I was surprised to find that Sisis had already risen high on the horizon. I got up quickly and went out to check where Dogen was. Mayo was still inside the tent, snoring. Why didn't you wake us up? Dogen shrugged. I figured, what's the rush? What if the Emperor was out to set out a false trail for us to follow, and we just believed him? What if it's just a ploy? I'm the old one in our group, and I should have more sense about these things. Oh, no. You shouldn't think that way. We all agreed to this, and we've been traveling, both Mayo and I, without you by our side for a long time. We were able to make it, Dogen. I know you feel accountable for us, but we're with you on this one. We want to rescue Kino. We want to save Akea. Dogen grinned upon hearing that. Then he handed me the biggest root crop I have ever laid my eyes on. Have a taste. It's quite juicy even when it's not cooked. I grabbed the root crop and eyed it reluctantly but took a bite to satisfy Dogen and to make him stop worrying about us. I was pretty surprised when the juice splattered inside my mouth. There was a blend of sourness and sweetness in the root crop's juice. Mayo was going to love this, I said before sitting down beside Dogen. We were both looking at the tent. He's probably still dreaming. Dogen chuckled. Yeah, he probably is. The clear sky was suddenly spotted with a flock of birds. Look at that, I said to Dogen. His eyes were already trained on them, and I felt him tense. Could be anything, he said. Could be the elder's friends watching over us, I replied. Yes, but it doesn't hurt to be careful. For all we know, the Emperor could also have spies. Then one of the birds swooped down. Dogen stood up and extended his hand, and the bird landed on his arm gently. There. Tell your friend that we are safe here, Dogen said. We are on our way to Karasthea. I stood up and studied the bird, wondering if it was Kala, the bird that Elder Mayan asked to be our messenger. A white feather near its head made it distinct among the flock of birds. Kala, I said, extending out my arm. The bird cocked its head, and its beady eyes were studying me. It flapped its wings to fly and transferred to my outstretched hand. I giggled. It is you. We need to know how far we are from Karasthea. Can you check for us? Go there to see and then find us. Tell us how many more days we need to travel by flapping your wings as many times as there are days before we reach it. Can you do that for me? Kala chirped several times, but I was unsure if it understood. Elder Mayan said that Kala would and that I'd just have to talk to it. The bird pecked on my arm several times before it flew away. Here's to wishful thinking that Kala understood me, I said, hoping that we could have this journey done and over with soon.
Miroe Pasap. I did not want to see Mayo go, but I never liked his friend. That pale girl Pyper has always hated my guts for no reason at all. She probably thinks that she's better than all of us, and I hate people who think that way. I may be a waif, but that does not make me any less of a human being. It just so happened that I had no family to take care of me. Pyper got lucky. She has a family, an entire clan, that cares for her and the loyalty of friends that surround her. I figured that with Mayo beside me, I would almost be invisible. No one would be able to block me, and at the same time, I could give him the same level of protection. No one would be able to hurt him. Too bad that he went out to rescue his other friend now. Enough of that. His location concerns me no more. I must remember why I went to Canela in the first place and see to it that my plans became a reality. If no one else would take me in, not even my twin, then an alliance with the Emperor is the only thing worth fighting for. I would protect him if he would have me. It has been days since I have started patrolling around the palace, and still, there was no sign of the Emperor. I eavesdropped on the conversation of the servants and yet had no clue as to when the Emperor would be coming back to Canela. Supposedly, this should have given me more time to think about how I would introduce myself to the Emperor. I planned on making a grand entrance, but how would I ever do that if he was not even here to see it? My stomach grumbled, and I was reminded that I had not eaten since last night. Now that Mayo has left, it has become easier to nick fruits from the market. I laughed inside my head when I remembered how Mayo would complain if I just handed him 1 or 2 apples. He always wanted 3 or more. Without him, the task of stealing apples becomes so much easier. I have never been used to eating on time, and quantity was never my problem, and so now, I do not need to steal as often. Right now, though, I found myself headed back to the market. I wished I had a few coins with me so that I could eat at a diner, but with sketches of my face plastered all over Canela, I doubt if anyone would take me in even if I offered them 100 gold coins. But perhaps someone would, although that someone would likely hand me over to the Emperor for even more gold coins. I walked faster to reach the market sooner, and in just a few minutes, I found myself standing in front of the Kanelan marketplace. People were bustling about, trying to get a better price for their trade. It should be pretty easy for me because the vendors and buyers were busy haggling and negotiating their products. I chose the one with the biggest crowd and slipped through the buyers unnoticed. When only one person was blocking me, I reached out and took an apple. I polished it and glanced sideways, and when I was certain no one was looking, I quickly hid the apple inside my pocket. Then I moved away from the crowd as discreetly as possible and chose another store where I could get some more apples. I had to do it at least 2 more times so that I would not have to go back here for the next 2 days. I have always been successful in stealing, and it was probably because no one wanted to look at me twice. Once they see me, the smile on their faces would turn into a sneer. They probably think that I would bring trouble to them. This suited me. In this sense, I have become invisible. Going back to the Kanelan Palace is challenging because the guards are patrolling everywhere. I took the trouble of borrowing a hat with a wide brim, borrowing because I intend to return it after I become a member of the Emperor's Palace Guards. Something similar to what Arden used to wear. The hat did not conceal my identity completely because I had a scar that stretched across my face that was so distinct even a child would be able to identify me in a crowd. But enough of all this rambling. I have to focus on finding the Emperor. I was busy trying to steer away from prying eyes when the sky suddenly darkened. I looked up to see a cloud formation big enough to dim the Kanelan sky. The rest of the Akeans near the palace gates were also staring above, and I heard hushed voices murmuring, "The Emperor must be back." Perfect. If the Emperor is here, I could pledge my loyalty and form an alliance with him soonest. I should have been done with my mission already, except that, oh, gods, for once in my life, I feel real fear. My heart thudded inside my chest, and sweat started coursing down my back. How I wish that the Emperor would take me with him. But what if he orders to have me executed instead? Would I stand a chance? Would I be fast enough to squish his heart? Would I even dare do that? I have heard a lot of bad things about him, and it is not like he is going to treat me any differently. The only consolation that I have is knowing for a fact that the Emperor is good to those who serve him well. He made a general into a king in one of the provinces in Akea, but at the same time, has deposed his mother from the throne. Why would I be an exception to how the Emperor treats people when I mean nothing to him, and we are not even related by blood? Would I not be as disposable to him as the rest of his soldiers, lest I have that one chance to prove myself? As I wiped the beads of cold sweat from my forehead, I wondered if I should head on straight to the canals of the palace or if I should still try to come up with an alternative strategy first. All I know is that I am running out of time. I took out an apple from my pocket, bit it, and started running after the cloud formation. There was no going back now. This is it. I was panting when I reached the Kanelan Palace. The cloud formation had gone, which meant that the Emperor was probably inside his chambers by now. It would be difficult for me to enter the palace unnoticed, and I cannot use the same route that Mayo and I took the last time we were here. After the registry of citizens was stolen, security had been tightened, and the soldiers probably distributed copies of the sketches of my face to all of the workers of the palace. One wrong move and I would be captured for sure. So I must make up my mind now. To get to the Emperor, I was left with no option but one. I hurriedly went inside and prayed that no one would stop me, but fat chance at that. I had only walked a few yards when a soldier approached me. "Hey, you!" he yelled. "Stop right there." I dared not look back and instead ran past him. The chase was on. I kept running and took the grand staircase, hoping that this route would take me to the Emperor sooner. If I remember correctly, his chambers were still on the top floor of the palace. It would take me some time before I reach it. I could still hear the footsteps of the soldier who was pursuing me, but it was good that the others had not joined in the chase, yet. "Stop him!" he shouted. I ran faster, taking 2 steps of the stairs with each giant leap. While I could hear my heartbeat pumping frantically, my energy doubled with an intense desire to reach the Emperor soon. There was a voice inside my head that kept chanting, "No one can save you but yourself. No one." On the 4th floor of the palace, I found myself almost face to face with several soldiers. I stopped in my tracks and decided to hide inside the nearest door that I was able to find. "What are you doing?" I heard someone say. "Go after him. He is an intruder." At that, I heard rushed footsteps. I crouched from where I was hiding and hoped that when the soldiers went straight inside the room, I could trick them and lock them in. I waited for the perfect opportunity, and when the door banged open and the soldiers walked in, I grabbed the nearest object beside me and threw it opposite my direction. The soldiers glanced towards that space and hurriedly rushed towards it. That was the moment I was waiting for. I stepped out from where I was and speedily went for the door. As I ran out, I closed the door behind me, but I was not able to lock them in. I was panting hard, and I was unsure if I could still make it to the top of the floor, but I really had to try. I only get one chance, otherwise, once the soldiers catch me, they would lock me in the dungeons, again. If that happens, I know that I will not have the same chance of escape as last time. Lucky for me, I was able to make it to the 8th floor unnoticed. This time I changed my strategy. Stealth was my only ally now. I watched out for palace guards patrolling and crossed the hallways only when no one was around. There were several cleaners that I ran into, but they did not pay me any mind. They were busy doing their tasks and did not think a lad like me would be of any threat to the palace. My heart had not stopped with its frantic beating until I finally reached the landing of the Emperor's chambers. I surveyed it closely as a rasping breath escaped me. Of all the places inside the palace, this was the most heavily guarded. The Emperor's men's shield were all here, and there was no way that I could get past them without drawing any attention to myself. I counted inside my head. At least 20 soldiers were stationed at the entrance to the chambers, and I would count myself lucky if inside there would be no one else aside from the Emperor. I had to expect and prepare for the worst. I braced myself for the final stretch of my mission. I breathed slowly, trying to calm myself. A steady stream of sweat coursed down my back, and my hands were shaking when I finally decided to come out of my hiding place. There is no other way. All 20 sets of eyes were immediately fixed on me. I heard the clashing of the swords against leather and steel as they were drawn out of their sheaths. "Who are you?" one of the soldiers bellowed. I observed them, trying to identify who among them was the leader. "I am Miroe Pasap, and the Emperor has summoned me." It was a surprise that my voice did not break and that I sounded far more relaxed than how I felt. "Why would the Emperor summon you?" came back the reply. The man's eyes were trained on me, and his hand held tightly on his hilt. Sysis hit the blade at an angle, and it shone brightly, reminding me of how painfully this could end. "I have a special power, one that the Emperor would need, so you must let me speak to him. I have come to pledge my allegiance to him. His Grace is not going to receive any visitors today because he has no time for mongrels like you." One of the soldiers inched closer to me but stopped immediately in his tracks nonetheless. His eyes bulged out of their sockets, and his mouth hung open when he finally realized who I was. "I know you. You're the one in the posters. The one who killed many palace soldiers. The one who escaped from the Kanelan Dungeons." At that, all of the palace guards shifted to a fighting stance, hands ready to wield their swords. "You are that criminal. Surrender to us or perish." My face was flushed in anger, and I could feel the heat seeping through my veins. "I only want to serve the Emperor. So please, just let me meet His Grace. I am not going to hurt him. I told you, I only want to serve him. No one is going to believe you after what you did. You have such a horrible power that no one in his right mind would take you to him. You will not be taken as a servant and certainly never in a position that would keep you near the Emperor. No matter what vow you swear, you will always pose a great danger to him. Do not take us for fools. Surrender now so that we can take you back to the dungeons, and perhaps if you do that, His Grace might decide to spare your life," the soldier sneered. "You don't understand. Let me through, please," I insisted. My heart was thumping because I knew that at this moment, there was no other option left for me but to use my power. I bent down, readying myself to attack the soldiers and to dodge any weapon that would be cast at me. I tried to calm myself and fed anger to my already burning chest. They will not capture me. I did not come here to die. The soldiers in front of me all moved into a fighting stance, but none dared to step forward. They held the door to the chambers steadily, and it was clear that they had no intentions of letting me pass through. Suddenly, the door of the chambers opened, and out came an elderly man. "What is all this ruckus?" he asked. "Don't you know that the Emperor is not taking any visitors for the day?" he said in an admonishing tone. His eyes fell upon the soldiers, and seeing their odd stances, his eyes were quickly diverted to me. "He's an intruder, General," the soldier said. "An intruder and a criminal. His head is wanted for the death of many Akeans." The general's eyes narrowed at me. "If he is a criminal, then what are you waiting for? Go ahead and take him to the dungeons." He was shaking his head in sheer disappointment at how the soldiers were handling the situation. "He is a dangerous one, General." "No one is dangerous enough. There are 20 of you, and he's just one scraggly lad." He was chuckling now. "If you do not take him now and I decide to take him alone, I will send you to the training yards and let you fiddle with wooden swords for moon turns." "General," I interrupted, "please give me a chance to talk to the Emperor. That's the only thing that I want to do. I promise you. I will never hurt him." "What arrogance!" the general spat out. "What makes you think that you can even hurt the Emperor? Don't you know what his power is? Don't you know what he's capable of?" General," a soldier said, "if I may, the lad can kill anyone using just his mind." The general's eyes were back on me. "Is that true?" he asked, his interest suddenly piqued. I didn't answer his question, which was probably a better confirmation than if I opened my mouth to answer him. "The dark heart," the general said slowly as he studied my face. There was a flash of recognition in his eyes as though he remembered seeing my face from one of the posters. "That's what your power is called. It was gone for a long time, and many people feared its return because the prophecies say that it would only manifest again if there is going to be a great turmoil upon the land." His white brows nodded. "But what about the good heart?" "The dark heart cannot exist without the good heart. The gods willed it so that there is a balance. One cannot exist without the other. I have a twin sister. I didn't really care about what our powers were called." "Where is she?" the general asked. "Is she with you?" "I don't know. I left her in Sinista a long time ago." "Very well, then. I cannot let you loose upon this land, especially since your sister is not here to counter what your power can do. Soldiers, take him to the dungeons," the general ordered. "Please, don't do that," I bellowed. 2 soldiers were already moving towards me, their swords were drawn out and now pointing at me. I will surely be captured if I do not use my power now. That was not the reason I went here. I closed my eyes and let hatred flow through my veins, and then I grasped both of their hearts and squeezed them so that they would stop beating. In an instant, their swords clanged to the floor, the soldiers gripped their chests. Panting, they fell to the marble floor. "Stop it!" the general yelled. "Don't move, or I will call upon the Emperor so he can banish you himself." "You don't understand," I said in a cold voice. "I am not here to bargain. I can end all of your lives here, right now, without even raising a finger. If you do not let me pass, that's what I intend to do. I am not here to beg, but still, I had to say please so many times, and you failed to listen. I do not kill unnecessarily. No one has to die unless you remain stubborn." My voice had gone cold and low. Emotions were raging inside of me now. This coldness seemed to have affected the soldiers because they stirred from where they were standing. The door to the Emperor's chambers was wide open, and all I had to do was walk in, but surrounding that entrance were the soldiers and the general, and they could very easily attack me as I passed by. "Throw your sword to the ground as a sign that you will not kill me when I turn my back on you. You cannot stop me from going to the Emperor and serving him. I told you, I'm not going to hurt him. I am here to serve his grace." The general raised his arm to signal his men to drop their swords to the ground, and one by one, they obeyed him. When the last of the sword was thrown to the ground, I walked forward, trying to predict what this group of men would do. They were all muscular that, even without a sword, they could wrestle me effortlessly, so I ambled, watching them from the corner of my eyes. The general was glaring at me, he stood ready to pounce on me. When I was already a few yards away from them, I stared ahead of me and saw the throne where the Emperor was sitting. If he had been there since I started walking in, then perhaps he had seen what had happened. I stopped and bowed down even at a far distance to show him my respect. It wasn't enough. The men who were surrounding him moved forward, threatening me with their swords. I knelt down quickly to avoid any bloodshed. I prostrated in fear in front of the Emperor after hearing the soft, rushed footsteps from somewhere in the room. The footsteps did not stop, and so I stood up in a rush, only to find that a soldier was already trying to jump at me. His arms were outstretched, and he was ready to grapple with me. I raised my hand, and with all the power that I could muster, I squeezed his heart. There was a moment when his eyes bulged before his body dropped lifelessly to the ground with a loud thud. Another one came after him, but I was faster this time. Before he could even leap from the ground, I had already squeezed his heart. It seems like they would never stop. They kept on coming at me, and most had their swords already drawn out, but before they could swing at me, their bodies fell in a heap while their swords clanged to the floor. I was wondering what the Emperor was making of this fight when an arrow pierced me through my shoulder blade. I fell to the ground as the searing pain shot through my entire body. Blood instantly soaked my shirt, and I could feel myself getting nauseous. The sight of blood had never done me any good because fighting for me never required bloodshed. A fist found my face, and I grimaced when it struck me. Another soldier now towered me, kicking me all over. This must be it. This must be how my mission would end. The Emperor did not even get the chance to hear my vow. My body was throbbing all over from the punches and kicks that it was receiving. But a thought came to me. The good heart, the general had said. For some reason, the fact that the general knew about my twin scared me. What if he goes after Goemi? I could never let that happen. I was born with her, it was not right to let her out into the world without me. Not when everything had become so chaotic. So even when I could feel my eyes shutting from the bruises, and my face was all bloodied, I opened my eyes and gazed at the soldiers' faces. I may not have had the energy to stand up, but I managed to squeeze all of their hearts until they fell on me like lifeless sacks. All of a sudden, the wind howled from somewhere in the room as though there was a storm brewing. I heard a cold icy voice above all the ruckus. "Who are you?" he asked. "Stand if you are still alive." It was the voice of my master, the one whom I vowed to serve for the rest of my life. And so, even though my entire body was hurting, I pushed at the bodies that piled on top of me, trying to stand up. Everything hurts. Finally free from the pile of bodies, I knelt in front of the Emperor while gasping for breath. My head felt heavy, and the headache that had started to build up exploded into something more excruciating. I winced, but I couldn't make His Grace wait for me. He, my master, was talking to me. I tried to stand up, but my knees buckled, and I fell to the ground. Blood dripped from my mouth to the floor. "What is your name?" the Emperor asked. I did not know why at that moment. It was the general's words that came to me, so when next I spoke, I said, "The Dark Heart, Your Grace. I am Miroe Pasap, and I possess the Dark Heart. I have no desire but to serve you." My gaze traveled from the boots that were in front of me upward to meet the silver eyes of the Emperor. They were burning as he watched my every move. He had walked over to where I was, and only several feet were separating us. "I will serve you, Your Highness." The Emperor did not move, but he continued studying me, and when I could not bear the silence any longer, I asked, "Will you take me to serve you, Your Highness?" It matters no longer what his answer would be. For me, it was already enough that I had asked. I would leave the rest to the Emperor. "Show me what you can do. Stand up and show me no fear," said the Emperor. I looked around as gasps filled the air. Everybody seemed to have lost blood as they understood the full meaning of what the Emperor was asking me. He wanted me to slay someone in front of him so that I could display my power, as though the dead bodies surrounding me were not enough. I looked at the Emperor, never letting myself cower from his glare while I raised my right arm, pointed it in a random direction, and made a gesture to close my fist. Inside my head, I was already squeezing someone else's heart. Someone choked in the direction that I pointed. I glanced and saw a man writhing slowly, clutching at his chest. I have not entirely ended his life yet because this man did me no wrong. But as I stared at the Emperor's cold eyes, it seemed that my display of power was not enough. So I did what I had to and closed my fist and, at the same time, squished the soldier's heart. I could almost tell the exact time that his soul left his body as a shriek pierced the utter silence of the Emperor's chambers. The silence was broken again as the soldier fell to the ground with a loud thud. The Emperor glanced at the body of the lifeless soldier before looking me in the eyes again. A slow smile formed on his lips. "Excellent power. One that would be of great use to me," he began. Your Grace, the general protested. He is dangerous to you. Forgive me for talking out of turn, but he could at any time kill you without lifting a finger. The Emperor turned to the general. His eyes were burning. A valid point. But I would rather have him fighting for me than release him to the ones who are rebelling against me. Don't you ever use your head to think? He said in a menacing tone. The general's face turned red in anger. Your Grace, he said. It is evil. When everyone else has turned against me, when everybody else wants to plant a dagger at my back, this lad will be there to kill anyone who would even dare raise a hand against me. The Emperor paused. Even you. He continued, I appreciate your warning, General, but this decision is mine to make. With him beside me, Akeans will see me as the lesser evil. He laughed. The soldiers shifted in worry from where they were standing. After a few seconds, the Emperor turned to me. If I give you an order to kill someone, do not falter. For that, I would bestow upon you the honor of being my new man's shield. As you know, the last one defected. He turned away from me and walked back towards his throne. Come, I need to talk to you alone. The soldiers surrounding us were stunned in disbelief at what had just happened. Perhaps they were all thinking that if that soldier was so dispensable to the Emperor, how much was their own lives worth? I began to ask myself the same question, except that I had quite the advantage. If I sensed someone wanting to kill me, I could easily counter that. I stood to my full height, though limping, and began to walk after the Emperor. For some reason, all the pain that I was feeling seemed to have slowly vanished. In my head, I was triumphant. The dark heart has finally found its way home.